coming to get you, Barbara.
Hello, I'm Sonny Landon.
Good evening, folks. Who's ready to talk about some Dario Argento? Howdy, folks. I'm Uncle Bill, and welcome to Finding Argento. It's a weird mixture of kind of like a backstory about Argento and then reviewing his first three films, which are known as the Animal Trilogy. And it's an amazing set of, and let me pronounce this right, because there's lots of bitches that love to get on to us, even though they know we're from Eastern Kentucky, about how to pronounce something. Giallo. I think that's right. Giallo films. Not Giallo or Giallo. giallo. So we're going to be talking about those films, and they're some of my favorites, man. Like, I've watched these, I don't even know how many times. I mean, Fulci, when you talk about like the great Italian horror filmmakers, you always talk about the same couple of people. You talk about Argento, you talk about Fulci, you know, you might throw in Soavi in there, you might throw in a couple others like Luigi Cozzi or some people like that, but it always goes back to Fulci and Argento. And depending on what kind of mood that I'm in, you know, I prefer Argento sometimes. I prefer Fulci sometimes. I don't know. Here lately, I've been on a huge Fulci kick, which is why this has kind of been, you know, the theme of this. So, you know, if you're familiar with both those guys, Mario Bava, yeah. If you're familiar with both those guys, then you know that like Fulci is what would be a good metaphor for the difference between Argento and Fulci? Like Fulci would be like of the newer directors today would be like Eli Roth. I don't know if that's a great, but he's like all the gore and shit like that. And then like Argento would be like today's kind of like Ari Aster or something like that. He's all about visuals and shit like that. So it just depends on what you like. I like them both, but Argento, well, both of them, like the storylines of any of those films don't make a lick of sense. They're not interested in telling any kind of like linear kind of story that you can follow or anything like that. They're much more interested in visuals and atmosphere and set design, murder design, which is to me, like if you're going to watch a horror film, like that's the kind of stuff that you want to watch. You definitely won't be bored unless you're one of those people that's like, you know, I don't want to hear dubbed movies or anything like that. Then you'll be bored. But I mean, in general, like they're exciting, they're fast paced, the murder set pieces are amazing, and nobody does gore like the Italians. I'm going to tell you, like, you're not going to get any better than those two guys. So Argento was born in 1940. His dad was a producer in what would be like Italian Hollywood, basically. His mother was a photographer. And from what I can understand, looking at a lot of these documentaries and reading some of his stuff, he grew up in a very odd manner in terms of not in a traditional way. He saw a lot of naked women when he was very young being photographed. He was on movie sets when he was very young. He saw all of the dynamics of how you make movies. Like I said, his dad was a famous producer in Italy. And, you know, even back then, I think it was kind of assumed that he was going to do something artistic. There's another story about him that talks about he was a very sickly kind of child. It doesn't really reference what he was sick with, but he stayed home quite a bit. And the assumption there is that he kind of got lost in himself and started to become more artistic and think about, you know, ways to make art rather than what normal kids would be thinking about, which is school and, you know, playing with their friends and things like that. So there's some thought that he was probably exposed to sexual things at way too early of an age, and that is why a lot of his films are centered around like psychosexual kind of themes. Not to say that he was like a pervert or a serial killer or anything like that, but it definitely like entered into his consciousness about those kind of themes, and they would become like part of his films. So at this time in the 70s, one of the more popular forms of entertainment was something called a giallo, which is named after the book and the yellow pages of a book that was like lurid kind of sex and violence novels. So Mario Bava probably did those way before Argento did. And Argento's background is much more in the Western theme than it is in the horror theme. He wrote or helped write the script for Once Upon a Time in the West, and worked a lot with Sergio Leone. So that was kind of his pedigree, which is very unusual that he would go into the types of films that he did, I guess. But I think that helped him a lot, because if you watch his films, something that Leone did in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and he would do in like, Fistful of Dollars and other films like that, something that he was famous for was he would do a wide shot, and then he would pull in really, really close on the people's faces to create like tension. And the best example of that I can think of would be is if you go and watch the end duel scene in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where it's this beautiful like wide shot of the three of them standing at separate parts of this graveyard, and then it pans into like each one of their faces. And if you notice in Argento's films, and a lot of his films, especially during like the violence and the death scenes, he does that same camera trick. It'll start out as like a wide shot, and then like it'll go. Sometimes it goes all the way into like the eyeball, and sometimes it just concentrates on the face or the expression. But sometimes it's just like these weird mishmash of all these things that I guess he learned from doing that. But that's kind of a little bit of a setup for like talking about some of these films. And if you guys, have seen these films or want to comment on these films, feel free to do that. I'm just going to talk straight through, and then I'll answer any questions or I'll pull up any kind of comments that you guys got. But the first film that I want to talk about, I don't know how many people recognize this, but this is the old Arrow Video. It's actually Arrow Films, or it is Arrow Video at this time, of Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which was Argento's first real theatrical film and was incredibly successful. And by the way, for those people that are watching this, I'm not going to like spoil any of these films, so you don't have to worry about that. I can't guarantee that somebody on the chat won't say something, but I'm not going to say like anything that would spoil the films, because these are amazing films and I wouldn't want to do that if anybody actually has never seen these. So this was his first film, and it's definitely a giallo, and one of the very first shots of the film kind of sets up the whole subgenre of giallo films, which is he shows the black glove killer, and he's kind of sharpening his or not sharpening, but he's kind of polishing one of his knives. He's got like his whole spread of knives, and it's one of the coolest visuals, because that really is like the template of any of these films that come later on when the giallo boom kind of happened. You usually see the killer in the first scene. You usually see like the black trench coat, the black gloves, the hat, and like whatever kind of murder weapons that he's got. But I always thought that was an amazing way to start a film like that. And you can see like how much influence it had. Now, if Bava created the giallo, then I think that it's safe to say Argento kind of made it really, really popular in Italy and in America. This film was so popular that it played for 2 years in a couple of theaters. So it's kind of like the Dark Side of the Moon of Italian films. And Born to be Rad's on here. How you doing, man? It says he has them all. He probably watched a handful. Definitely wants to catch up. And you definitely like these. To be honest with you, like these movies, the early ones are ones that I kind of like avoided for a long time, just because I don't know. I think something about the titles of them didn't really make them seem that appealing. But like honestly, they're some of the most appealing when you actually sit down and watch them and realize that the titles are usually like one scene in the movie that somehow or another predicts or affects the ending of the film. And that's definitely the case with The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. So I'll get into talking about some of the things that about this film, some of the things that I love, some of the things that are not so great. But all in all, I think this is like one of the best, intro films of any director. Well, I mean, you got like Night of the Living Dead by Romero, but this is definitely like up there with one of the best. So to give you like a little bit of a plot, there's an American writer who is in Italy, and he kind of stumbles upon what he thinks is an attack or an assault. He sees like two figures, a man and a woman, and they're kind of like wrestling as he's walking by this house. And he runs in to try to like figure out what's going on and try to save them. And as he's doing that, like there's like two panes of glass that are probably like 5 feet apart, which is the weird. Like you can tell it's totally like a set piece. Like nobody would ever have a house like this. It's completely like impractical. But like the two panes of glass with like two doors, like in each one has a door, and he gets caught in the middle of them because the killer kind of closes the door, so he's stuck in the middle and he can see everything that's going on, but he can't like do anything about it. So he sees this woman and she's been stabbed and she's crawling through the floor, and he thinks that he sees something else. And this is a big thing with Argento's movies, is like somebody in the film will see something that happens that's like a huge part of the plot, but they won't be able to remember it until like later on in the film. I always thought that was great too, and it's like really, really used well in Deep Red, which I'll get to when we do part 2 of this, because that's one of, if not the best, giallo films ever made. But like, with this one, that's kind of a theme as well, and so he sees all this, and at the same time that that's going on, there's a string of serial killings that's going on. So he stays in Italy as he's getting ready to go back to the U.S. He stays in Italy to try to help the police catch this killer who they think is involved with this attack. And that's basically the rest of the film, is just him trying to piece together clues to figure out who is the person that was behind it. And so I'll say this. I won't say, much more about it than this. The reveal at the end of the movie is amazing. It's not my favorite reveal. My favorite reveal is Four Flies on Grey Velvet. Or my favorite end, I should say, and reveal, in a way, of these 3 movies is Four Flies. But this is like right up there. And the some of the set pieces that made this as popular as it was in Italy was the beginning scene. I think that like I said is the template for all the rest of these movies. You see the killer, you're predicting something horrible is going to happen because he's got this cachet of like knives, and he's sharpening them and polishing them, and like that's the beginning of the film. And then there's a couple other scenes that are freaking amazing in this movie. There's a scene where the guy, the lead, the protagonist, is laying in bed, and he turns to like, and there's a door in front of him, and he turns to like a clock or something like that, looks over, and then when he looks back, like the killer is there in like the door frame and like comes at him. I always thought that was a great scene. And there's another scene at the end of this where the killer's trying to get in. And it's very much like He Knows You're Alone or movies like that, where he's taunting. The killer taunts the victims in this, and he's like, you're going to die before the end of the night. And so, this one of the leads, the female lead, is in this bedroom, and the killer can't get in because like she's pushed like a drawer or something up in front of it. And so he stabs like a hole just big enough to see in the door and is like looking through it. And that scene goes on forever, which makes it like, so much tension. It makes it like so tense. It goes on and on and on. You don't know if he's going to be able to get in or if like she's going to get out, and just how that all plays out. And then like the huge reveal at the end of the movie, like the way that that's handled. And there's not a lot I can say about it without giving it away, but the first time I saw the movie, I did not predict it. And some people might predict it, but I did not. So Machiavelli 420 says, I like his movie Trauma from the early 90s. The killer collects everybody's heads. That movie, my friend, has just got re-released from Vinegar Syndrome, and that's probably the major reason that I bought that last pack from Vinegar Syndrome, is because that was in it. And we had talked. Weird part about that is, I still can't figure this out. We had talked to Felsher and Don May about this movie, because everybody was always talking about, when's it going to come out on a decent Blu-ray and this and that. And they were like, oh, it's never going to come out. There's all these issues with it, and it's, and then I'll be damned if it wasn't like 2 or 3 days later that Vinegar Syndrome put it out. I love that movie too. I've got the Anchor Bay back in the day did a great set. It's like the 5 films of Argento, and it's got that one in it, and it's got The Card Player, Do You Like Hitchcock, and Phenomena, I think. And that's just an amazing set. I encourage anybody to get that. But yeah, so Bird with the Crystal Plumage. By the way, the title of the film, not to give it away, but I think that's my favorite title related to something that happens in the film. Like all these movies, like you kind of figure out what they mean in reference to the film as it plays on, but the reveal of this one's is probably my favorite. So I've got this version, which is the old Arrow Video version, and I've got this one, which I haven't even opened yet, which I need to though. This is the new one from Arrow, which is an amazing set. Like, it's the one that has, I don't have Cat o' Nine Tails like this yet, but I want to get it. This is the one that has like the lobby cards and the poster and the booklet and things like that in it. So check those out. So if I was to rank these 3 movies, this one would be number 2. And the next one would be number 3. And the next one is, this is the old Blue Underground version of the Cat o' Nine Tails. And so now Argento has gotten famous, in Italy at least, and the budget of this movie is double the budget of Bird. So I think the Bird with Crystal Plumage had $500,000 budget. This one has $1 million budget. And I'm thinking that he maybe spent the majority of that budget to get Carl Malden, who is in this movie, it's really weird to see him in this movie. You're talking about a guy that was in, On the Waterfront, The Streetcar Named Desire, like all these classic movies, but he's in this. So I'm not sure, but I've probably watched the opening of this movie, I don't know, like 50 times, because the opening is just something about it. Like, it's so fantastical, so kind of like, it's like Suspiria, but a giallo in a way, because you got Malden, and the plot behind this is Carl Malden is a blind guy, and his niece is with him, kind of like helping him navigate the city, and they're walking around, and they overhear something that he thinks is some sort of crime or espionage or something like that, and he just catches like a glimpse of overhearing what it is. But the part about that gets me is how well Carl Malden actually plays a blind guy. Like, it's one of the best overall performances of that I've seen in a film, whether it be like a horror film or anything else. There's the scene where he's got like the huge puzzles that he puts together, even though he can't see. He's like, they're like crossword puzzles, and there's something about the way that it's filmed that is just amazing. So yeah, so he used to be a newspaper reporter, and come to find out that what he overheard is connected to this pharmaceutical company and this experimental project that they're working on. And the rest of the film is basically him and this other guy who's a detective trying to figure out like who the person is, or what, not who the person is, but what the details are behind this experiment. And in the process of doing that, they end up being targeted by a killer. And so then you've got that going on too. Now there's as much wrong with this film to me as there is right. So yes, there is a blind guy in Suspiria too, which that's probably one of the creepiest scenes in Suspiria. Actually saw Suspiria in the theater, and here's a little known fact, real quick, just a side note. If you go and see Suspiria with a 35mm print in a theater, there's a huge likelihood that you are going to be like gravely disappointed, because that film is going to be cut to shit. It's not going to be the film that you saw on DVD or Blu-ray or anything like that, because like most of the 35mm prints of that film were just censored and cut to pieces, and that's the way it was with this. Like there were scenes where, like, especially like I remember the barbed wire scene and a couple of the scenes with the dog is another one, that it's just like it happens and it's over like that quick. Like they didn't show a lot of gore in that. So to find a uncut and unrated version of Suspiria in 35mm is almost impossible. And yeah, I'll be talking about a couple people mentioned Inferno. I'll be talking about Inferno next. Inferno, or in the next series of videos, Inferno is one of those films that is, it's kind of like, Inferno is to like the fantastical version of Argento as Cat o' Nine Tails is to the giallo. Like there's some great stuff in it, and it just falls apart too. And that's what I was going to talk about with Cat o' Nine Tails. So there's some great stuff with Malden, and there's some great stuff with the little girl, and there's some great stuff with, great like murder set pieces with them. One of the guys, getting hit by a train, and the way that it's filmed is like, it's clearly fake, but it's like, it's so slow and deliberate, and just like he did a lot of the scenes in Suspiria, it's just, it makes it even more brutal, even though it's kind of like just silly in a way. But I thought that the murder set pieces in this movie were outstanding. It's not as gory as like as he gets later with like Deep Red and Tenebrae, but it is like you can see like where he's headed. And as you get later on in the film, it is when it starts to fall apart, because I think if he would have just stayed on that particular storyline and not gone and done like a bunch of stupid shit out in like the cemetery, and there's just all these scenes that are strung together in the movie that seem to be like just trying to buy time or something like that, that it's insane to try to get through this movie, because it's like 3 different movies, and the first half is a great giallo murder mystery. The second half is like something out of Phenomena, and the third is like just, it's all just ridiculous. But that being said, the ending has a great scene with an elevator shaft, and the way that it's filmed, not to give anything away, but the way that it's filmed is something that I had never seen before. And it's just so painful and deliberate, and I don't know. But like I said, when you go in to see the Cat o' Nine Tails, if you do see it or if you haven't seen it, then I encourage you to just kind of think of it like a failed experiment, because that's kind of what it seems like. The first half of the movie is incredible and just well shot, well lit, and then it's like he runs out of ideas, and the rest of it is just not there. So, but I will say this. Those two movies, if you watch Bird with Crystal Plumage and you watch Cat o' Nine Tails, you can totally see where he's going, like where he's getting ready to go with, other films like Deep Red and Suspiria and Tenebrae. Like, these are like the practices for those. And yeah, it gets amazing. So I don't own Four Flies on Grey Velvet, and I don't know why that is. It came out in 2009, I think, from Shameless or one of those companies. But I've never owned that one. But Four Flies on Grey Velvet is just, I think it's the least, one of the least liked of Argento's films. Cat o' Nine Tails is Argento's least favorite film, by the way, if that tells you anything about it. But a lot of other people, they just absolutely do not like Four Flies on Grey Velvet. But I think that it's probably like one of his best early films. And just for the ending alone, which is just one of the best endings ever. But anyway, the story around it centers around like a rock and roll drummer who he keeps getting these weird phone calls, and he's being stalked by somebody, and so the he finally gets a way to confront the guy that he thinks is stalking him. Things go bad. He ends up like stabbing the guy, and he thinks, oh shit, like, kind of gets away and thinks that that's it. And then he starts getting these letters and, these kind of cryptic messages that say, lets him know that somebody saw him do this and they're going to try to blackmail him. Now, another premise behind the film is this idea that the retina of your eye captures like the last image that you see. And so when people are killed in it, like that's the last, and that comes into play in the film, is like, what is the last thing that they saw that gets kind of burnt into their retina. So this was supposed to be the last of the giallo films that Argento did. He was supposed to go on and do a film, I think, with his dad called 5 Days in Milan. And that film bombed heavily. And so he was like, oh shit, like I got to go back and, go back to the roots, the things that made me popular, and remake another giallo, which became Deep Red. So there was a space there between this movie and Deep Red where he was trying, I guess, to be like a real serious filmmaker, and that didn't kind of work out like he planned it. He goes back to his roots, and he never stopped doing that after that, by the way. Like, he never kind of veered too far away from either giallos or the fantastical kind of supernatural films that he did with Suspiria. The thing about, I'll tell you right off the bat, the thing about this movie that makes it is the soundtrack. And I'm going to butcher this guy's name. I'm from Eastern Kentucky. That's what I do. But his name is Ennio Morricone. And he's also the guy that did the score for all of the Sergio Leone westerns that you probably know. And he did the score for Hateful Eight, too. And The Thing, supposedly, even though I don't think that he did. I think that is John Carpenter, who just kind of wanted to work with him. I don't think that that's because it's just too carpentry. But the reason I bring that up is because that is the whole atmosphere of the movie, really. And several of the scenes in this film benefit so much from that soundtrack, that score, that it's ridiculous. Especially the ending, which is, I wish I could talk about the ending because it's like one of the greatest endings that, you know, oh, it's just such a great horror ending. And the camera work and the visuals and the effects and everything in that ending are just some of the best. But it's got a lot of twists and turns in it, and I didn't really predict like where it was going either. But it has enough kind of red herrings in it, I guess, to kind of throw you off. There's one particular character in it, the female character in it, that is so over the top and just so memorable. And the ending scene, you know, is all about that too. And it's a pleasure to watch that. Watch somebody like Argento, who, from what I can understand, like wrecked like 15 cars to get the ending of that the way that he wanted it. And like, who the hell does that anymore? Like, who would spend that much time, unless you're like Stanley Kubrick or somebody like that, and just to get that perfect scene. And it is like you're watching it and you're like right there with it. And it's an amazing, amazing scene. So it looks like a couple people on here have seen Four Flies. And we got Four Flies has great atmosphere. Yeah, I mean, I think that, like I said, that has a lot to do with the score. There's something about that movie that's so just tense, and it's really well made. And he does a lot of experimentation with camera work in that movie. He does a lot of experimentation with the way that he edited it too. And Bird with Crystal Plumage is, yeah, I think that's like his most competent film. It's weird too because that's his first film, but it, from beginning to end of that movie, it all makes sense. It's all shot amazingly well. The writing is really good, and it's like he never really was able to duplicate that as well. I mean, I love Suspiria. I think it's like one of the best horror films ever made, but it makes not a damn lick of sense. And the dialogue in it is just like some of the worst shit ever. And that just wasn't the way with the Bird. I'm just going to call it the Bird from now on. So it looks like CK's in here. Justin says, so far I've only seen Suspiria and Tenebrae. Check out more of his films. If I had a recommendation, I would say pick up, if you haven't seen any of the ones that I've talked about tonight, then pick up Bird and watch that one. Any version of this, like I think Blue Underground has a version of it too. I would recommend those. Because it's, like I said, like you can kind of totally see that he came to the table kind of fully formed as an artist with all these tricks that he would perfect, but he had them all like in the beginning of his career. It's really bizarre. I haven't seen somebody that was kind of that good right out of the gate. Yeah, there's not many people like that. And so if you like stuff like Tenebrae, then you will definitely like that one. Yeah, if you want to, you definitely want to get the new Arrow one. Yeah, there's a weird thing about this Machiavelli. A lot of people know this too about Fulci and Argento's films. All those Italian films had no sound. Everything in those films was dubbed. Which is just so bizarre to me to think about. But like, yeah, when you go back and watch those movies, any of Fulci's or Argento's, like none of that is on set kind of, that's all like dubbed over. And that's just the way that they made films. I'd love to know why that is, to a great degree, like why they decided to do it that way, but they were all kind of done like that. A Blade in the Dark is that's a Roberto Bava, I think. That is an amazing film as well. I mean, there's a lot of good giallos that followed the ones that we're talking about with Argento. But in general, I think he had to be the best at it. A lot of people would say, you know, they would point to like Bava and maybe Jess Franco with some of his crazy shit, but let's see, the newer Arrow ones have Italian versions, but they're dubbed too. That's just so bizarre to me. Most of the time the films were made in English. There's another weird thing about all of these films, now that you kind of brought this up too. Every one of the films, especially even the later ones that he did, of Argento's films has some like American in it. Like you would think, you know, he's an Italian filmmaker, that he would just do like he would have an Italian cast, or, you know, that would be just referencing Italian characters, but there's always an American. I guess even at that point, they're looking at selling it to the States. But from the very first film, you know, you get to Suspiria, there's an American character in it. You get to Tenebrae, there's an American character in it. Like that was always, it was always there. And I'd kind of like to know why that was too. Like what made him always keep that like American character in there? Was it just so he could sell it that way? Because it doesn't seem like he made films for the homeland, if you know what I mean. Yeah. I'm going to struggle with this. Cartederdention. That's what I was... one of the things about Inferno, which I can't wait to talk about that film, because it's one of my favorites, and it's another one that falls apart, but I completely agree with you on that. The first 15 or 20 minutes of Inferno is some of the most beautiful filmed cinematography that I've ever seen in a horror film. The underwater sequences in that, I've never seen anybody do anything better than that in a horror film, or in any film really. The issue with that movie is that like it just completely falls to pieces after the first half. Like I don't know what the hell. You know, as I get more into these movies and start trying to figure out like what happened to these movies, I can probably give you more insight. But in Cat o' Nine Tails and in Inferno, they completely like fall apart in the second half. Just they make absolutely no sense. But the beginnings, it's almost worth it. Like, you know, it goes from like a 10 to a 5, but you average it out to like a 7, and you know it works somehow or another. I love the beginning of Inferno. I probably watched it. It's like a master class of like how to make atmospheric, tense kind of filmmaking, and just that first scene. And unfortunately, it's just shit after that. But Stuntman Mark says Inferno has the worst ending of all of the 70s and 80s movies. I kind of agree with that. Like, it's pretty horrible. Although I would put Phenomena up there as just having like a really horrible ending too. When a fucking chimp shows up and that's the ending of your movie, it's depressing. But Phenomena looks amazing. Just the color scheme of that movie is amazing, and you know it's probably like one of the last great fantastical kind of films that Argento did, the supernatural kind of films that he did, and Jennifer Connelly's in it too. That's not bad. You know, you're really gonna beat that. But yeah. Opera. Everybody has a favorite Argento movie. I mean, for the people that have seen those movies. But I'm going to say that Opera's right up there. Like, it is right. There's something about that movie, too. The look and the feel of that movie. And there's really two different types of filmmakers. There's the type of filmmaker that made horror films. Like, let's say... let's take a guy like Peter Medak or something like that who made The Changeling, where it's like a straight narrative, like you follow A to B, the guy going through all these steps and everything like that. And then there's a guy like Argento who was like, I don't really care about any of that shit as much as I do about like the visual style of the film, what it looks like, and what I'm trying to convey from my own nightmares onto a screen, which is exactly what those movies look like. But somewhere in the middle, though, actually, you've got guys like Carpenter, who I think were able to do both. Like, you take a movie like Prince of Darkness that's clearly influenced by Argento, and it's nonsensical, but he's able to keep like a story moving through the characters and things like that. I think he does a pretty good job. Let's see. Lucio Inferno, the opening to Phenomena is great. I completely agree with you. I haven't even talked about the score to those movies as well, but Jesus Christ. Like the score to Deep Red, Suspiria, once you get into the Goblin era, you get Deep Red, you get Suspiria, you get... I don't think the score to Inferno was that great, but that's Keith Emerson, that's not Goblin. It's really weird. I like the car scene. The score to that scene is great, but other than that, I didn't care too much for it. But Phenomena, Opera, all those movies, oh, Jesus Christ. Great. The peephole scene in Opera, that's what I'm talking about. He's always got some sort of scene like that just completely subverts like expectations and where he ratchets up the tension. And you can see that too if you go back and watch Bird with Crystal Plumage. There's a scene like where he makes a peephole with a knife through the door, and it's just one of the best scenes in the movie. So Opera might be your favorite. Yeah, I mean it's like I said, something about that movie. I got to go back and watch it again for this next kind of series. The tracking shot in Tenebrae from the first floor to the second floor was fantastic. Yeah, I think, and that's a shot that's like, people still talk about that shot today, man. It's considered like his Texas Chainsaw shot, where in Texas Chainsaw, the camera goes under the swing and it comes up and goes like where the house is and gives like a full, and then with the shot from Tenebrae, it goes all the way up and over top to the first and second floor. And it's just one of the best shots in horror. I like that too, except Argento would use heavy metal music. There was a scene in Phenomena where he uses Blade in the Dark, which is an Iron Maiden song, and it just didn't fit. I always thought that from the first time that I saw the movie. It just was like he tried to cram like a metal song into a film somewhere, and it just absolutely like did not fit in that scene or really in that movie. It's used much better in Demons. Like the heavy metal music in Demons seems to fit that style of movie where the energy is just like full on aggressive, chaotic kind of stuff. But like go back and watch Phenomena where he throws that music in, and it's just like, where the fuck did that come from? Like, it just comes out of nowhere. Saxon would have worked better, that's true. Goblin does indeed kick ass. So Lucio Inferno wants to know, he says he's never seen any of Argento's movies after Opera. Are there any good ones besides Trauma? Well, there's one that I haven't even watched yet that I just bought that CK claims is great, which is Sleepless. It came out from, was it Scorpion put that out maybe? I think they did. And that one's supposed to be great. People shit all over this, but I like Mother of Tears. There's a lot of people that hate that movie. I don't get the hate, but that was one of the ones that came out. That only came out like 2008, 9, something like that. Maybe earlier, maybe a little bit earlier, but it's in the 2000s. Jake says Crystal Plumage has his favorite Argento theme, but Four Flies is my favorite. Yeah, I mean, it's like neck and neck for me, man. Like Crystal Plumage and Four Flies, I'd almost give it to Four Flies for the ending, but like I think that Bird is altogether like a more competent film. So that's why I would put that number one. I would put that number one, Four Flies number two, and Cat o' Nine Tails number three of those that we talked about. Stuntman Mark says really likes the music in Sleepless too, especially the opening thing with the guitar riffs. I need to watch that movie. I can't believe I haven't watched it. Argento is starting in the new Gaspar Noé movie. Maybe starring in the new Gaspar Noé movie Vortex. He got a standing ovation at Cannes Film Festival. Yeah. I didn't even know like he freaking acted. But that's amazing. Stuntman Mark says Sleepless is really cool. I'm going to check that out. So that's the whole point of time directors or movies don't make sense. I think that they just were more interested in the feeling of a movie than they were with if it made sense or not. And there's something about that like I really like. It's kind of the same as like David Lynch's movies. If you take out Dune, we're not talking about Dune. Everybody knows Dune sucks. But they've got a quality to them where they don't make a lick of sense a lot of times. You can't figure out what's going on. And there really is no narrative to them, to be honest. Like, I don't think that these guys planned out a narrative, especially in Argento's later, films like Suspiria and Phenomenon. I don't think they planned out. I think that it was just a series of images that they wanted to kind of convey, kind of strung together in a nightmarish kind of way. But, yeah, like that's why people remember David Lynch and they remember Argento too, though, because that's the style that they had. Like you look at something like Lost Highway or, Eraserhead or something like that. Like that shit doesn't make a lick of sense, but it's memorable. Like you don't forget it. So, in keeping with this theme, though, what are some of the essentials if we're talking about Italian directors? We can talk about Argento, we can talk about Fulci, we can talk about any of those guys. Jennifer or Peltz? I actually like Jennifer better. God, I remember when those came out. Masters of Horror. That was such a good series. I wish something like that existed again. It's a shame what they did to Takashi Miike. I remember hearing Mick Garris talk about that, where he said, he worked on that series, and they basically gave everybody a list of that they could do anything they wanted except like these 2 or 3 things. And I think one of them was like child murder. And so, he didn't get the memo and they just butchered his ass. And Stuntman Mark says that Argento's got a movie coming out next year. And of course it's about a killer in Italy. Yeah, I mean, dude could make any kind of film to me at this point. And I'm going to watch it. Like, I don't care. I watched Dracula 3D. I've got it in there. It's awful. But I watched it. Mother of Tears, a lot of people hated. I love that movie. There's some guys, like Romero's another one, who I would watch them read a phone book if they put it out. I watched that horrible amusement park, the Romero amusement park, which came out on Shudder, which was like his lost film. it's just the shittiest shit you'll ever see. And I'm sure there's some people out there that will find something redeeming about that movie in the storyline, but in terms of it, just a whole movie, it was pretty friggin' terrible. So Bruno Mattei, you want to talk about Bruno Mattei? God. Well, we can talk about Hell of the Living Dead or Rats. We can talk about the fact that how he didn't get sued for Hell of the Living Dead. He may have. I don't know. I didn't think he did. But, yeah, Bruno Mattei, I'll do a whole separate line of videos on Bruno Mattei later. So, yeah, that's the first series of these. I wish that I had Four Flies on Grey Velvet. But you got, these are the early giallo films. They're called the Animal Trilogy. There's no connection in these films. They're just called the Animal Trilogy because there's an animal in the title. So, you Bird with Crystal Plumage, Cat of Nine Tails, Four Flies on Grey Velvet. So next, I'm going to do where things get really interesting, which is like the middle of his career. And we'll talk about shit like Deep Red and Suspiria and Inferno and those type of movies. I don't know how long into that to go because, dude, like, I mean, the guy made a lot of films and there is a ton like in the middle where he really kind of hits his stride. So I don't know. We'll see. I've seen those movies the most out of any Italian movies. So when you get into like Deep Red and Suspiria and, you know, Inferno and Phenomena and Opera and those movies, like, yeah, like I've seen those movies a million times. And we'll get to these two. Stendhal Syndrome. That's another one that I think is pretty great. It's like, that's a later Argento one too. Black Sunday by Bava, All the Colors of the Dark by Martino, The Beyond by Fulci, and Suspiria by Argento are the essential Italian horror films for me. That's a damn good list right there. Black Sunday by Bava is amazing. I saw that film when I was probably about 13, and it really like fucked with me even then. A great film. Just, yeah, great. Barbara Steele, who actually kind of met her. Yeah, I think it was one of the Whorehound shows that we were at. It was really weird though because she kind of was just sitting there and she had like super dark sunglasses on and like a breakfast at Tiffany's kind of thing. And she just had her arms crossed and looked like she was going to kill anybody that came up to her. And we kind of came into passing and I said hi to her and she said something, I don't really remember, but she really looked like she could just explode or implode while she was at that show. Yeah, The Beyond by Fulci. Yeah, you got to watch The Beyond. Fulci would be another good one to do a show like this on. Yeah, Claudio Fragrasso. Definitely the best. Made some straight up fuck classics. We talked about him a lot. Yeah, a lot of these films are talking about just the VHS up until I think DVD and Anchor Bay and Blue Underground got a hold of these. They were all cut all to shit. A lot of the Italian films were because they're so graphic and violent, which is really one of the greatest parts about them. But like I said, like trying to find a 35mm print of an original uncut version of any of these films, you're not going to find that. But we're about an hour in, and that was kind of what I was hoping for, like each one of these to be about an hour to an hour and 30 minutes. So I hope everybody kind of enjoyed this, and I hope that the people that really like the Italian films and Argento and Fulci We'll stick around. There'll be at least 2 more of these. I'll do one, like I said, that covers the middle, and one that covers kind of the late part of Argento's career. And the next one, being just the real, I guess, meat of his work, the stuff that everybody kind of remembers. And I can't wait to talk about Suspiria, and especially Suspiria and Inferno, just because of how batshit crazy that those movies were and still are to this day. Thank you, Justin. I appreciate that. Yeah, we didn't really... There's so many of these like this, too, that we didn't really even get a chance to talk about. Like, they're not related to Argento, but kind of are, like Torso. Great kind of films. But anyway, I appreciate everybody coming over. And I will see you for part 2, The Middle Years. I'm Uncle Bill. Check us out at DeadPitOnPatreon.com and DeadPit.com. And I am out of this bitch right about.
Give us the thumbs up.
Up your butt.
Like, subscribe. And if you subscribe, here's something else you can do. Once you subscribe, you can click the bell notification, right? And it'll notify you anytime that Dead Pit puts up new shit.
Or don't. I really don't give a if you do or
I
don't.
want you to. I want you to.
I don't care.
Let's keep our community growing here on YouTube.
I don't like it. I don't want you to do nothing.
Listen, they need to do that now.
No, don't you dare touch it.
Thumbs up. Subscribe. And click that bell. Thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon. DeadPitOnPatreon.com is the only place to check out a complete archive of the old Dead Pit radio shows all the way back from 2005 on, in addition to the midweek shows and fan commentaries, exclusive podcasts, and much more. Dead Pit on Patreon.com if you're interested. Tiers start at only $1.